The twin sons of Verati beat down mercilessly on the crowded bazaar, turning the stone plaza into a furnace of desperate commerce. Jackson Reeves pulled his wide-brimmed hat lower over his weathered features, the leather of his coat already damp. With sweat, despite the early hour, he'd come to this forsaken world for rare minerals, not to witness the uglier side of interplanetary trade, but witness it he did. The commotion drew him like a magnet toward the eastern quarter where the less savory merchants set up their stalls. The crowd had gathered around a reinforced platform, their voices rising in a mixture of excitement and unease. Jackson shouldered through the press of bodies, his trader's instincts warning him to walk away, even as curiosity pulled him forward. At the center of the platform stood, being unlike any he'd encountered in his 15 years of cross-system trading. Her skin held the translucent quality of living crystal, shifting between pale silver and deep blue as she moved. Long hair like spun starlight cascaded over shoulders marked by intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Heavy restraints bound her wrists and ankles. But she stood with the bearing of royalty, reviewing subjects rather than merchandise awaiting purchase. "Behold the prize of the Outer Rim," bellowed the auctioneer, a corpulent man whose expensive robes couldn't disguise his crude origins. Captured from the forbidden sectors, she possesses abilities that will astound and serve you well. The woman Jackson instinctively knew she was female, despite her alien features, turned her luminous eyes toward the crowd. When she opened her mouth, the sound that emerged was not words but pure music, a crystalline note that seemed to resonate in the very bones of every listener. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Wine glasses in nearby stalls exploded in showers of colored fragments. Display cases cracked. Several onlookers stumbled backward, hands pressed to their ears, while others stood transfixed by the haunting beauty of the sound. "Silence her," the auctioneer snarled, producing a device that crackled with electrical energy. The woman's song cut off abruptly as pain racked her frame, but her eyes never lost their defiant fire. "As you can see," the man continued, sweat beading his forehead, "she requires proper handling. But think of the possibilities. Entertainment, intimidation, even weaponry in the right hands." The crowd murmured appreciatively, but Jackson felt sick. He'd seen slavery before it. It was an unfortunate reality in the outer systems, where law meant little and credits meant everything. But this felt different. This was a conscious, clearly intelligent being with abilities that marked her as something extraordinary. Reduced to a commodity. "Opening bids at 50,000 credits, the auctioneer announced. Hands shot up around the platform. Jackson recognized some of the bidders' crime lords, corporate executives, private collectors of exotic specimens. Each represented a future of captivity and exploitation for the crystalline woman. She turned then, and their eyes met across the crowd. In that moment, Jackson saw something that made his chest tighten, not pleading or desperation, but a quiet request for recognition. She wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking to be seen as more than property. 200,000, Jackson called out, his voice carrying clearly over the noise. The platform fell silent. The auctioneer's eyes widened with greed and surprise. Around him, other bidders turned to stare at the unremarkable trader who'd just tripled the current bid. 200,000 going once, ... The auctioneer began, scanning the crowd for challenges that didn't come. The sum was beyond what most were willing to risk on a single acquisition. The woman's gaze never left Jackson's face. He saw a flicker, of something surprise, perhaps, or the faintest hint of hope. Going twice, ... Jackson's hand moved to the credit transfer device at his belt. The sum would wipe out most of his savings, money meant for upgrading his ship and expanding his trade routes, but some choices transcended mere profit and loss. Sold. As the crowd began to disperse and arrangements were made for the transfer, the woman continued to watch him with those luminous eyes. Jackson approached the platform, trying to project calm confidence while his heart hammered against his ribs. "You just bought yourself more trouble than you know," she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Maybe," Jackson replied, producing the release codes. "But some trouble's worth taking on." The cargo hold of Jackson's ship starbound nomad hummed with the steady thrum of hyperspace engines. Now she had given him her name during the silent journey from the market, sat cross-legged on a makeshift bed of supply crates. Restraints finally removed. The marks they'd left were already fading, her crystalline skin seeming to heal itself with remarkable speed. "Your ship is old," she observed, running her fingers along the worn metal bulkhead, "but well maintained. You care for things that serve you faithfully." Jackson looked up from the navigation console where he'd been plotting their course to the neutral trading post at Kellara Station. "Everything deserves respect if it does its job well." He paused, then added, "That includes people." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Is that what you see when you look at me? A person? What else would I see?" "Most beings see a weapon," Naya said, her voice growing distant. "My people, the Resonari, we are born with the gift of song. But gift is perhaps the wrong word. It is as much curse as blessing. Our voices can shatter stone, calm storms, even reach into another's mind and soothe their pain." She gestured to a small potted plant wilting in the corner. "May I?" Jackson nodded, curious. Naya approached the plant and began to hum, a low, melodious sound that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull. Before Jackson's amazed eyes, the plant's leaves unfurled, its stems straightened, and tiny buds burst into bloom. "Remarkable." He breathed. "This is nothing," Naya said sadly. "My sister Zena and I, when we sang together, could make entire forests flourish or calm the most violent tempests. That is why they took us. They, the hegemony. They came to our world promising trade, cultural exchange. Instead, they studied us, learned our weaknesses." Her crystalline features darkened. "Iron disrupts our vocal cords, makes singing painful and weak. They used this knowledge to harvest my people like crops." Jackson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's recycled air. Harvest, some for entertainment, others for warfare. The hegemony has many enemies. Imagine having singers who can drive opposing forces mad with fear or shatter their weapons with a note. Naya's hands clenched into fists. "I was separated from Zena during the raids. I don't even know if she still lives." The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting their conversation. "Jackson, you need to get up here," came the gravelly voice of Captain Oren Thale, the grizzled spacer who piloted the Nomad. "We've got company." Jackson and Naya hurried to the bridge, where Oren's weathered hands danced over the scanner controls. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the display. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace behind us. "Configuration," suggests hegemony hunters. "How did they find us so quickly?" Jackson demanded. Naya touched her throat delicately. "They implant trackers in all their ... acquisitions. I should have warned you sooner. But I hoped the distance would give us time." "Can we outrun them?" Jackson asked Oren. The captain's scarred face creased into a grim smile. "This old girl's got some surprises left, but they're faster, and if they get within boarding range ... He left the implication hanging. "They won't take me back," Naya said quietly, but her voice carried absolute conviction. "I would rather die than return to their laboratories." Jackson studied the approaching blips on the scanner. 3 ships meant at least 30 armed soldiers, possibly more. Even if they escaped this pursuit, others would follow. The hegemony was known for its persistence when valuable property went missing. "There might be another way," he said slowly. "Oren, take us toward the Kellara asteroid field. If Naya's abilities are what she says they are, ... you want me to sing at asteroids?" she asked, confusion evident in her musical voice. "I want you to sing at their ships," Jackson replied. "We'll need to get closer first." Oren's cybernetic eye fixed on Jackson with alarming intensity. "That's either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. The frequencies required to affect their hull plating ... double quotes." Naya began thoughtfully, then stopped. Luminous eyes widened. Yes, it could work. Yes. But I'll need time to find the right resonance, and they'll be shooting at us." "Leave the shooting to us," Jackson said, moving to the weapons console. "Oren, plot a course through the densest part of the field. Use the asteroids for cover." As the Nomad dove toward the tumbling rocks, Naya positioned herself at the ship's rear observation port. She began to vocalize, her voice starting as a whisper and gradually building in complexity. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, but underneath its melody lurked something that made Jackson's teeth ache. Behind them, the hunters closed in, their weapons charging for the kill. The first hunter ship exploded in a cascade of crystalline fragments as Naya's voice found the precise frequency to shatter its hull plating. The remaining two vessels immediately changed tactics, spreading wide to avoid the devastating resonance. While maintaining their pursuit through the asteroid field, impressive, came a cold voice over the comm system. But predictable. Jackson's blood turned to ice as he recognized the speaker. Vex Corrin, the most feared bounty hunter in 3 systems, known for his ruthless efficiency and complete lack of mercy. If the hegemony had hired him, they wanted Naya back badly enough to pay premium rates. "Hello, little songbird," Vex continued, his voice carrying the satisfied purr of a predator who had cornered its prey. "Did you think your voice was the only weapon in this game?" The main view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of Corrin's ship. The bounty hunter himself stood silhouetted against banks of monitoring equipment, tall, lean figure in matte black armor, his face hidden behind a featureless mask that reflected their images back at them like a dark mirror. But it wasn't Vex that made Naya cry out in anguish. Chained beside him stood another Resonari, her crystalline skin dulled by exhaustion and bearing the marks of recent torture. Dodged. The resemblance to Naya was unmistakable. "Zena," Naya whispered, her voice breaking. "Sister has been quite cooperative in helping me understand Resonari physiology," Vex said, one armored hand resting possessively on Zena's shoulder. "Did you know that iron filaments inserted directly into the vocal cords can modulate your abilities? She can still sing, but only the notes I allow." Zena's lips moved, but the sound that emerged was discordant. Painful, her natural voice twisted into something that made everyone on the Nomad's bridge wince. "You monster," Jackson snarled, his hand moving toward the weapons console. "Careful," Traitor Vex warned. "My finger's quite close to a device that would make your sister's current discomfort seem pleasant by comparison. Now then, here are my terms. Surrender the fugitive, and I'll consider allowing you to leave with your ship intact." "And Zena," Naya demanded, tears streaming down her crystalline cheeks. "Remains my property, of course. The hegemony has specific plans for a matched pair." Captain Oren's cybernetic I-word as it focused on the scanner display. "Jackson," he said quietly, "third ship's moving to flank us. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now." Jackson's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an opponent who held the one card guaranteed to make Naya surrender. But sometimes the only way out of an impossible situation was to make it even more impossible. "Naya," he said quietly, "how precise is your control? Could you hit specific systems on a ship without destroying it entirely?" Her luminous eyes met his, hope flickering in their depths. "With enough time to study the resonance patterns? Possibly. But why would you want to disable rather than destroy? Because your sister is on that ship," Jackson replied. He turned to the comm system. "Vex, I have a counter-proposal." The bounty hunter's mask tilted slightly. "I'm listening. Single combat. You and me hand to hand on that large asteroid at bearing 27 Mark IV. Winner takes both sisters." Vex's laugh was like grinding metal. "You think I'm fool enough to risk everything on your questionable combat skills?" "I think you're arrogant enough to believe you can't lose," Jackson shot back. "Besides, what's the fun in just taking what you want? Where's the sport in that?" The comm went silent for long moments. When Vex spoke again, there was genuine amusement in his voice. "Very well, traitor. You've managed to pique my interest. 1 hour to reach the asteroid. But I'll be keeping both sisters here as insurance against any creative interpretations of our agreement." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Oren observed. "Probably both," Jackson admitted. He turned to Naya. "I need you to do something for me. When we dock with that asteroid, I want you to start singing again, but not at Vex's ship. Then at what?" Jackson pulled up a detailed scan of the asteroid field, his finger tracing the massive iron-rich rock that would serve as their dueling ground. At that, the entire asteroid is loaded with metallic ore. If you can find the right frequency, understanding dawned in Naya's crystalline features. Turn the asteroid itself into a weapon. The resonance could create seismic disturbances, maybe even fractures that she stopped, her expression growing troubled. But Xena will be on Vex's ship when it docks. If the asteroid breaks apart, that's where faith comes in, Jackson said grimly. Checking his sidearm and the small arsenal of tools he carried for planetary trading. Faith that I can get to her before the rock comes apart, and if you can't. Jackson met her luminous gaze steadily. Then we all go down together, and at least Vex doesn't get what he came for. As the Nomad changed course toward the designated asteroid, Naya began to hum softly, her voice already reaching out to test the resonance frequencies of the tumbling rock ahead. Behind them, Vex's ships followed like predatory shadows, unaware that their prey had just become the hunter. The asteroid's surface was a jagged landscape of iron and stone, carved by eons of cosmic bombardment into a maze of canyons and towering spires. Jackson stood in the center of a relatively flat clearing, his breath forming small clouds in the thin atmosphere provided by the temporary environmental generators both ships had deployed. 50 meters away, Vex Corrin descended from his vessel like a dark angel of death, his movements fluid and predatory. Up close, the bounty hunter was even more intimidating, nearly 2 meters tall, his black armor adorned with the trophies of previous hunts. A bandolier of exotic weapons crossed his chest, and the twin hilts of vibroblades jutted from his shoulders. I must admit, Vex said, his voice carrying clearly across the airless space through their comm units. This is refreshingly old-fashioned. When did you last kill a man with your bare hands, traitor? I try to avoid it when possible, Jackson replied, loosening his shoulders and checking the gravity, about 60% of standard. It's enough to make movement interesting, but not impossible. How admirably civilized. I, on the other hand, find it quite therapeutic. Without further warning, Vex exploded into motion, crossing the distance between them in 3 powerful bounds. His first strike was a hammer blow that would have crushed a normal man's skull. But Jackson had spent years trading in rough frontier worlds, where quick reflexes meant the difference between profit and a shallow grave. He rolled aside, feeling the wind of Vex's fist passed centimeters from his face and came up with a carbon fiber blade in his hand. The bounty hunter spun with inhuman speed, and suddenly they were dancing a deadly ballet across the asteroid's surface. Meanwhile, aboard the Nomad, Naya had positioned herself at the ship's most powerful communications array. Her voice rose. In a complex harmony, each note carefully calculated to resonate with the asteroid's iron core. She could feel the rock responding, its crystalline structure beginning to vibrate in sympathy with her song. But she could also feel something else, a faint, familiar harmony trying to break through the discord of Vex's torture devices. She whispered, and for a moment her song faltered. On Vex's ship, Xena had been left under the guard of 2 hegemony soldiers, while their master indulged his taste for personal combat. The iron filaments in her throat burned like fire, but she could hear her sister's voice calling across the void. Slowly, painfully, she began to add her own notes to Naya's song. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Where one resonary voice could shatter glass or crack stone, 2 voices in perfect harmony could remake reality itself. The asteroid began to sing in response, its entire mass becoming a resonating chamber that amplified their combined power beyond anything either sister had achieved alone. On the surface, Jackson felt the ground begin to tremble beneath his feet. He and Vex were locked in close combat now. The bounty hunter's superior strength and equipment balanced by Jackson's desperation and intimate knowledge of dirty fighting techniques learned in 100 port cities. Your little songbird is more clever than I gave her credit for, Vex panted, his mask's vocal processors giving his voice an electronic rasp. But it won't save you. The vibroblade in his left hand screamed toward Jackson's throat, but the traitor had spent the last crucial seconds maneuvering their fight toward one of the environmental generators. At the last moment, He dove aside and put his full weight behind a kick that sent Vex stumbling into the machine's intake fan. The bounty hunter's armor saved his life, but the impact sent him sprawling just as the asteroid's song reached a crescendo. That made reality itself seem to bend and warp. Cracks appeared in the rock face, spreading like a spider's web through the iron ore. Vex's ship, still docked to the asteroid's surface, began to shudder as seismic waves propagated through its hull. Now would be good, Jackson shouted into his cum unit as he sprinted toward the enemy vessel. Aboard the Nomad, Captain Oren's scarred hands flew over the controls, bringing their ship in close to Vex's vessel. Docking tube extended. You've got maybe 2 minutes before this rock comes apart. Jackson burst through the airlock into chaos. The hegemony soldiers were struggling to maintain their footing as the ship bucked and twisted. He found Xena in the detention area, still chained, but her voice now free and clear as her song joined her sister's in perfect, terrible harmony. "Can you move?" he shouted over the crescendo of sound. The restraints, she began. Jackson's plasma torch made quick work of the chains. Together they stumbled toward the docking tube as Vex's ship began to tear itself apart under the stress of the asteroid's controlled collapse. They made it to the Nomad, just as the asteroid finally surrendered to the sisters' combined song. Massive rocks split along its core, releasing energy that had been building for millennia. Vex's ship, caught between the fracturing halves, was crushed like an egg as the Nomad pulled clear of the expanding debris field. Jackson collapsed into a chair on the bridge, every muscle in his body aching from the fight. Beside him, Naya and Xena held each other, their reunion made all the more precious by how close they'd come to losing it forever. "Is he dead?" Naya asked. Looking back at the glowing debris that had been Vex's ship, Captain Oren's cybernetic eye focused on the scanner display. "If he survived that, he's tougher than his reputation suggests. But I'm reading no life signs, no emergency beacons. I think we can safely say that particular threat has been neutralized." But even as he spoke, deep in the debris field, a single escape pod's emergency beacon began to pulse steadily in the darkness. 3 months later, starbound Nomad dropped out of hyperspace above Sanctuary, a world that officially didn't exist on any star charts. Hidden in a nebula that played havoc with most scanning equipment, it served as a refuge for beings who had escaped the various forms of bondage that plagued the outer systems. Jackson stood at the observation port, watching the planet grow larger as they descended through the atmosphere. Beside him, Naya and Xena gazed at their new home with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The sisters had grown stronger during their journey here, their voices learning to harmonize in new ways that spoke of healing rather than destruction. "It's beautiful," Xena murmured, her voice now clear and musical, without the harsh discord of Vex's torture devices. The iron filaments had been carefully removed by a medical team at their previous stop, leaving only faint scars that would fade with time. The planet below was a tapestry of green forests and blue oceans, dotted with small settlements that looked more like carefully tended gardens than cities. According to the data they'd received, Sanctuary was home to nearly 10,000 beings from across the galaxy, all refugees from one form of oppression or another. "The hegemony doesn't know about this place?" Naya asked, came a new voice from the bridge entrance. Counselor Dimitri was a tall, willowy being whose species Jackson had never encountered before humanoid, but with skin that shifted color with his emotions and large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to see everything at once, had met them at Death CE. The previous station, serving as Sanctuary's unofficial ambassador to the wider galaxy. "But suspicion and knowledge are different things," Dimitri continued, his skin showing the deep blue of contentment. "We have arrangements with certain parties who ensure that official records show this system as uninhabitable. The nebula's radiation makes most scans inconclusive." As they landed at the main spaceport, Jackson was struck by the diversity of beings going about their daily lives. A family of crystalline entities similar to the Resonari played in a nearby park. A group of what looked like living trees tended a garden of impossible geometric beauty. Everywhere he looked, he saw beings who had found peace after escaping the horrors of their past lives. "It's remarkable," he said to Dimitri, as they walked toward the arrival processing center. "It is necessary," the counselor replied, his skin shifting to a determined orange. "The galaxy is vast, but freedom is still a rare commodity in too many systems. Here we try to preserve what little we can save." The processing was surprisingly simple, no invasive scans, no detailed interrogations about their past, just a basic health check and an orientation packet. Naya and Xena were assigned a small cottage on the outskirts of one of the settlements, complete with a garden where they could practice their healing songs without disturbing their neighbors. That evening, Jackson found himself at the cottage's threshold, uncertain whether to knock or simply leave. His business here was finished. The sisters were safe, free, and had found a place where their abilities would be valued rather than exploited. But the prospect of returning to his solitary, trader's life felt strangely hollow. "You're thinking very loudly," Naya said from the garden, where she and Xena were coaxing a patch of withered flowers back to vibrant life with their combined voices. "Just trying to decide what comes next," he admitted, joining them among the blooming plants. "You could stay?" Xena suggested, her voice shy but hopeful. "Sanctuary always needs people with your skills, traders, who can move between worlds without attracting attention." Jackson considered the offer seriously. It would mean giving up his independent life, the freedom of the star lanes, the excitement of never knowing what the next system might bring. But it would also mean being part of something larger than himself, helping others find the same freedom he'd given the sisters. "The hegemony will send others," he said finally. "Vex Corrin wasn't the only hunter in their employ." "Then we'll face them together," Naya replied, her luminous eyes meeting his steadily. "All of us. That's what Sanctuary is, beings who refuse to face darkness alone." As if summoned by her words, other residents of the settlement began to gather in the garden. Some were former slaves like the sisters. Others were political refugees, exiles, or simply beings who had chosen to leave their old lives behind. But all of them shared the same quiet determination, the decision to build something better rather than simply survive what they'd escaped. "Besides," Xena added with a smile that made her crystalline features glow, "someone needs to teach you to appreciate proper music. Your taste in songs is terrible." Jackson laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuine warmth. When had he last laughed like that? When had he last felt part of something that mattered beyond the next profit margin or trade route? "All right," he said, settling into a chair that someone had brought from the cottage. "I'll stay for a while, see how this paradise of yours holds up under scrutiny." As the evening deepened and the twin moons of Sanctuary rose over the horizon, the gathered beings began to share stories of their journeys, how they'd escaped, what they'd left behind, what they'd hoped to build in this hidden corner of the galaxy. Naya and Xena added their voices to the conversation. But more often, they simply sang, their harmonies weaving through the night air like threads of pure hope. Jackson listened to it all, his trader's mind already planning supply runs and communication networks that could help other refugees find their way to this sanctuary. The stars above held the same promise of adventure they always had, but now that promise felt less lonely. In the distance, barely visible through the nebula's glowing clouds, the lights of approaching ships flickered like new stars being born. More refugees, more beings, seeking the freedom that Sanctuary offered. And Jackson found himself looking forward to greeting them, to helping them take their first steps into a life where their chains were only memories. The singing continued long into the night, a melody of hope that carried across the settlement, and beyond, toward the stars that held so many souls still waiting to be free.